Conspicuous consumption.
According to Thorstein Veblen, conspicuous consumption is defined as the emulation of consumption patterns of other individuals situated at higher points in the social hierarchy. In other words, people want to buy as many expensive goods as possible in order to flaunt their wealth.
Shows of wealth, however, are important to individuals because of the signals that they send to other people rather than the actual value of the luxury goods. For example, male peacocks devote a lot of time and energy into growing their luxurious tail feathers, and the price of their feathers is precisely why they attract female peacocks. Similarly, highly visible luxury goods are purchased by people not for their useful value, but rather the message they send to others.
Veblen was an author in the 1800s who became famous for his critique about the newly rich population, who try to emulate the spending of upper-class members in an attempt to establish their own place in the upper class. Veblen even satirized the social classes and compared them to parasites that thrive off their disposal of money.
According to Veblen, preferences are determined socially in relation to the position of individuals in the social hierarchy. What he meant is that higher classes influence lower classes and what they decide to spend their money on, creating a trickle-down pattern of spending. As well, higher class individuals try to differentiate themselves from lower classes by demonstrating the economic resources they have.
In his essay, The Theory of the Leisure Class, he discusses how people at different social standings find different ways to show off their wealth. For example, the upper class throws extravagant parties and give each other expensive gifts. In the middle and lower class, people try to maintain nicely decorated homes in hopes of emulating the behavior of the rich.
However, for some goods, the trickle-down pattern doesn't necessarily apply, but rather the idea of trickle-round, or status float phenomenon could be used. This is the tendency of fashionable practices to percolate upward from lower to higher status groups. The main example, jeans. These were originally produced for the working class. Now they can be seen on all levels of the social hierarchy.
Another unintuitive example of these influences that Veblen argues is that the lower the family is on the social hierarchy, the bigger the role the wife plays in creating the family's social status. In rich families, the husband does not have to go to work often because they are already very wealthy, so he can stay at home and control the home sphere of life. This corresponds to increasing their self-esteem, which is one of the highest levels on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. However, in lower classes, the husband must go to work daily, so the wife has more control of household affairs. Veblen argues that the wife's daily household tasks, such as cleaning and decorating the house, end up being the most significant display of social standing, which corresponds to a lower level on Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Closely tied to the correlation of how time is spent on social level is Veblen's idea of how individuals can demonstrate their wealth with the use of extensive leisure activities. According to him, some activities are a waste of time and effort. When someone is able to take time off work to go play golf, it demonstrates the wealth and status of the person, elevating them in the eyes of others.
During the booming economy of the early 1990s, the classification McMansion began to define the ostentatious architecture in which the primary focus was flattery rather than sensible living space. During this time period, declining employment regulation, falling hourly wages, and a booming stock market propelled the upper middle class into newfound wealth. This new segment of the economy interpreted their prior views of wealth and tried to emulate the spending patterns they formerly felt they were missing out on. This tendency became widely noticeable in the housing market, where neighborhoods of mass-produced megahomes expanded rapidly. In this housing trend, newly rich used ostentatious overdevelopment to display leisure that they had not before experienced. Trickle-down behavior taught them that theater rooms and attached gazebos were symbolic of upper-class taste. In a very cyclical manner, the push for McMansions trickled back down to the middle class, and this overconsumption, coupled with subprime loans, caused the housing crash. While much of the newly rich was damaged by this cycle of consumption, the mass-produced McMansions remained vacant, awaiting the next cycle of trickle-down behavior.
Patterns of conspicuous consumption also differ based on race. Visible goods are items that are easily portable, intended to display the wealth of their owner. On average, African Americans and Hispanics are found to spend 20 to 30% more on visible goods than whites, although these racial differences decrease with respect to age and marital status. One reason for the divide could be African Americans trying to counter the stereotype that they have a lower average income than whites. Related to Veblen's ideas about gender roles and social hierarchy, the display of visible goods is not just limited to blindly flaunting wealth. People's visible goods also signal their assets and therefore raise their attractiveness as a partner. Stereotypically, the need for such display is more important for men trying to attract wives, which is reflected in the fact that the need for such signaling declines with age as people enter long-term relationships and get married. An important part of conspicuous consumption goes beyond people signaling their overall status with displays of wealth. People are constantly trying to prove that even within their economic status, their income is higher than the average. They place great emphasis upon making further ranks within a given economic status. This would explain the need to distinguish between the upper and lower middle classes. The middle class no longer can be considered a single class.
Conspicuous consumption has also manifested itself in the emotional states of the upper class. Today there is an affliction known as affluenza that is defined as the inability to perceive the negative consequences of the constant pursuit of more. As the upper class puts more effort into exuding an appearance of high society, they find themselves caught up in unforeseen consequences like consumer debt, mental illnesses, and greater disparity of social classes. One of the most notable examples of affluenza in modern culture is the case of Ethan Couch. Couch was responsible for the killing of 4 people and injuring 11 while driving heavily under the influence of both alcohol and Valium. However, Couch managed to get out of his charges with only 10 years probation on driving and a rehab requirement for his affliction. Couch had a whole team of lawyers that were able to plead and an inability to recognize what was excessive due to his affluent upbringing and addiction to consumerism. Many experts speculate that the reason affluenza has become such an issue is because of the ubiquitous nature of manipulative advertisement in the developed world. By blurring the lines between what people want and what they need, ads have furthered the agenda of conspicuous consumption by selling the idea that you need this item, and if you cannot afford it, then you are somehow less of a person compared to someone who can, and thus social classes are further polarized by the excessive expenditures of the upper class.
To begin our discussion, we are going to focus on real-life examples of conspicuous consumption, how this topic relates to films such as The Queen of Versailles and The Great Gatsby, and how idealistic lifestyles have become the driving factor behind individual behaviors.